Amend the Mass Media Group's e-store is now live.
We've got Reparations Now, Policy Over Party, and Cut the Check, branded merch and hoodies, hats, and tees, and even V-necks for the ladies.
You can even get a commemorative, one-of-a-kind Cut the Check spatula spreader. The engraved keepsake life knife is guaranteed for a lifetime and can be passed down to future generations. Go to etmmediagroupstore.com.
That's etmmediagroupstore.com. Right now, as always, appreciate you.
Visit ETM Media Group online merch store and Cutco the check.
My name is Jonathan Bohannon.
All right, sir. So what are you doing here, and what are we here for?
I'm here because I am in full support of the Reparations Task Force for the state of California, and I'm here to also gain an insight on what the public is thinking, what the task force members are thinking, and hopefully, help get the message out, get the word out, get the movement, or keep the movement going, because his reparations are long overdue.
Okay, so where you originally from, bro?
Military kid, so I never really got a chance to plant my feet anywhere specifically, but most of my family's out of a place called Petersburg, Virginia, and North Carolina, and also it's a county in Prince George's County in Maryland. So between those three, pretty heavily rooted, traditional East Coast Black family style. We're all over the place.
Okay, all right, man. So can you explain kind of your migration out to California, how you came out to, how you got out to California?
I got out to California by chance. Another reason why I believe in reparations, a lot of us didn't get a chance to know our dads growing up. I didn't get a chance to know my dad until I was an adult. And I found out that he had some roots here. I had found out I had siblings. And I took a trip to California my first time in 2014. And I didn't know my dad was stationed in Presidio in San Francisco before I was born. And when I got there, it just felt familiar. And 2014, I came out here just as a trip. 2016, I was just looking for a complete start over. And I thought about San Francisco and my experience, and I was like, I think I got what it takes. And 2016, I hopped in my little Hyundai with over 200,000 miles and tailpipe hanging off. Made the drive in the dead of winter. Made it here beginning of March 2016 and landed a job in 3 days, a bigger job in a month, and a career the following year. So, I've just been really grinding it out, and it was kind of tough, but it was worth it. So, there's a lot of opportunity that I was able to see in California, but I'm also able to see how certain groups of people, particularly Black people, have just been left out, and nobody from San Francisco should have to struggle to buy a home in San Francisco. That's just kind of messed up, and it's the same thing going on in Sacramento, LA, just about everywhere in the surrounding counties. Black people are getting forced out, and I'm seeing it. It's time. It's long overdue.
Well, let's talk about San Francisco, man, since you mentioned San Francisco.
Right.
All right, so I'm sure you've been following the San Francisco Reparations Task Force.
Right.
One, can you give us your opinion on what's going on with the San Francisco Reparations Task Force? And also after that, I think you have some plan, if that's correct, if you kind of want to do a brief summary on that. So I guess question one, once again, is your opinion on the San Francisco reparations and also the plan that you have.
Okay. For the San Francisco Reparations Task Force, the San Francisco Reparations Committee, they are trying to pass legislation, 101 points, by the way. Unfortunately, a lot of people focus on one aspect of it and throw themselves off a cliff, which is the $5 million per resident plan. Now, for the other 101 recommendations, it involves education, it involves financial training, it involves ways for people to convert their public housing into condominiums, essentially, where they will eventually have ownership over the property. They talk about a wide variety of things. So if you get the chance, check out the San Francisco Reparations Committee, the plan they have in place. And please, I would urge anyone who's looking at that plan to not just focus on the $5 million aspect. There are so many great ideas within that plan. It hasn't been presented yet to the Board of Supervisors, but when it is, we'll see what the measures are actually there. Now, my opinion on it is, fiscally speaking, I know that every black resident who's been through these hardships, systematically and systemically, extorted from the economy, left out of economic prosperity deliberately. I think $5 million, you can't really put a price tag on what people are actually owed, especially considering the fact that a house there costs $1 million. But that could be a serious financial burden for any municipality. So there's going to be great pushback fiscally from any plan that involves such an exorbitant amount. And I don't want this to be a Tulsa, Oklahoma syndrome where people think we tried to do reparations, they said no, therefore we can never get reparations, because you see how people remember Tulsa, Oklahoma. They hear about what happened, they become immediately discouraged. And I don't want people to be discouraged about reparations. So the way my plan is set up, my plan basically involves two things. The first thing is setting an interest rate cap. When you have an interest rate cap, you can afford a lot more things with a lot less money. And I'm not just talking about an interest rate cap on a mortgage. I'm talking about an interest rate cap on student loans, on car loans, on personal loans. And it needs to be something in place for at least a 50-year period minimum. That way people have time to actually get their reparations, because if you give out a check now, we don't know how long that check is going to last. We don't know where it's going to go. And, the truth of the matter is, if you give someone money, you have no right to tell them where or how to spend it. So I don't want something like that to backfire, where 20 or 15 or 25 or 30 years from now, we're asking for reparations again. Similar to how people are asking for a second minimum wage hike, because we can't address inflation with minimum wage. Inflation will keep going, and we will have to raise the minimum wage again, unfortunately. That's just how it is. So with that interest rate cap, say someone making minimum wage in the state of California could then afford maybe a $500,000, $700,000 home off of minimum wage. But with interest rates at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%, you can't do that on minimum wage. You would need a larger down payment, and at least that way, a minimum wage, if you have two earners who make minimum wage, they could afford to move into a home and start a family. And a family, in my view, is a very instrumental part of black prosperity. Having a family, having a home where you can raise a child and not worry about day-to-day, necessities. But yeah, with the 1%, my interest rate cap would be 1%. I don't think interest rates should be 0%, because the banks won't like that. There has to be something where there's give and take. And the way I view it, the banks owe America a favor because we bailed them out, and America owes us a favor because we bailed America out. So the second part would be a reparations fund. It's a place where you can put the money, and not just any money, but a reparations fund where people can actually donate money to it for a tax write-off. So what that will do, that will incentivize people to donate. We're talking about businesses, individuals. Anybody can donate to it for a tax write-off. Companies, even other countries can donate to it if they wanted to. So that will incentivize a lot of people to try to rectify the harms done. Just as, unfortunately, with Black Lives Matter, we saw what happened. We saw how many people wanted to donate to Black Lives Matter for the cause, and nobody knew what was going to happen with that money at the time. That's unfortunate, but this is a time for us to learn from, our mistakes such as that. So a fund like that could be managed by, say, the Freedmen's Bureau or something like that. And that'll give people a place to put money, and that money can then be used to give to people individually, not just community programs or organizations, but to actual hands of people. And when you're talking about having a fund where anybody can donate to it, there are so many companies who support black people in February, but not in January, not in March, not in April, not in June, not in July. So in the month of February, companies could be donating by the millions. There could just be random millionaires out there who can donate to it. If people do that, then there will be, by the way, this fund will be permanent. It'll be a fund that people can donate to. It'll be a fund that people can donate to forever. It's a permanent reparations fund, so you can donate to it this year and get a tax write-off, the next year and get a tax write-off, the following year and get a tax write-off. That'll create a very large pool of money that can be dispersed in the way that's equitable to real reparations. And that combined with the low interest rate will make it a lot easier for a lot of people to uplift entire communities, change a culture of people not knowing their credit score, not being very financially literate. And I think that's very unfortunate that too many of us have become financially illiterate, but it's a reality that we have to address if we want this to work for the long term. So I don't want to be fighting for this for 50 years from now. A plan like that won't cost the taxpayers a single dollar. It won't cost anybody a dime because it doesn't require state or city funding. It's just people donating naturally, and with a low interest rate, some people might not even need to get that much money, even though they're owed it. But some people might actually forego cash for the chance to get a 1% interest rate that they can afford with the job they currently have. We're not at all incapable. So not being incapable means that we can actually do a lot with what we're given. So right now, the pushback that you get from anybody who's against reparations is, why do I have to pay for it? I think that's a good way to dodge the why do I have to pay for it question, because if you do it that way, they don't have to. And if they do have to pay for it, it's through their banks who are trying to raise interest rates to compensate for it, when in reality, they get bailed out. So, I think that would expose the banking culture as well. So, there's a smart way to attack this problem of reparations, and I think that's the most diplomatic yet comprehensive way to do it with the least amount of pushback. Because once the taxpayers aren't worried about where the money's going to come from, they no longer have an argument. So my goal is to kill the argument before it starts. So once that plan is, if that was a plan that was to be adopted, then the only people who will be opposed to it are people who just straight up don't like black people. And by opposing that plan in the public, you would put yourself out there. It's kind of a chess move. Who's really against us and why? And if we can put something like that in place, we can identify those few quote-unquote bad apples and deal with them accordingly. But if you're trying to get, $80 billion from any state or any city municipality, I don't think that'll be very successful. I hope it will be. If it is successful, I think that's great. But if it is not successful, then we shouldn't give up. And I think this would be a great second approach. So I'm not here to discredit anyone who's pushing that forward to get that type of money, to get those checks to people. But I would suggest, to consider what happened in Alabama. The people who marched from Selma to Montgomery, they weren't marching for their right to vote. They were marching for everyone's right to vote. And if we're talking about giving out checks like that here, it could sabotage the efforts in other southern states, because other southern states will catch wind of what we're doing here and say, no, we're not doing that here. You'll never get reparations. But if we do something like an interest rate cap, that can definitely be replicated in other states without people worrying about tax dollars.
Okay.
And, over a 50-year time period, the amount of good that can do is immeasurable, because it's never been done. So that could be a first move in history to prove that having economic access to resources can alleviate the burden of poverty. So if we attack the root causes, such as high interest rates, on those who have been, economically disfranchised the most, then we can prove to the world what economic advancements or economic advantages can do to a practically dismantled group of people. So it's long overdue. If this one doesn't work, I think my plan will be pretty solid. But we just have to see what people want. And Hopefully this doesn't become into a, knuckle dragging fight between groups of people who are just hell-bent on fighting each other versus communicating. That would be a tragic conclusion, or it would be a tragic path to take, because when people fight, nobody thinks about the consequences of said fight. People leave with broken limbs, bruised egos, bruised physically, missing teeth. We shouldn't approach this reparations idea that way. I don't want to fight for this. I want to communicate, and I want to come to an agreement that is economically beneficial for everyone involved, without anyone having to suffer or anyone having to come out of their pocket more than they usually do. So hopefully that answers your question about my plan. There are plenty more details, but if you can plug in some of these numbers, if you think about the house that you own, think about how much you would end up paying had the interest rate been 1%. If you have a car loan, think about what your payments would have been if it was 1%. If you have a student loan, think about what your payments would be if it was 1%. If you're trying to start a business and you got a loan, think about how much easier it would be for you to pay off that loan if the interest is 1%. Especially seeing as how you were denied the chance to even get a loan. Your ancestors were denied the chance to get a loan in other places. We're starting from scratch. So help us start from scratch so that we can finally end the narrative of black on black crime and all these statistics related to crime and poverty. Give people the chance. Give people a hand up. If you want to give us a handout, please. We're owed it, honestly, because the labor was there, so it's really not a handout. But if you want to give us a hand up, there are many of us out there, like myself, who will gladly take a 1% interest rate cap. There are many things that many of us can do with something just that much that can change lives and future generations for at least 5 or 6 generations to come, because we'll have the resources to do that.
All right, so 2 more questions. So one, what came about? Why did you feel like you wanted to approach this plan? And I'll ask you the second question after that.
I decided to come up with this plan finally in the summer of 2022. The first thing that made me think about the economics of, or the effects of slavery, the effects of Jim Crow, was when I finally got my degree in 2010. I landed a decent job in 2011. In 2012, I decided to start making payments on my student loans. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to prove that I'm serious about paying off these student loans. So I saved up money for about a month, and I decided to contact my student loan, my lender, and started making a payment. I decided to make a $1,000 payment immediately. And when I made the $1,000 payment, I found out that $800 of that $1,000 payment got eaten up by interest. And at the time, it didn't make sense to me why a $1,000 payment would only have $200 going towards the principal. I felt devastated. I felt like, how am I supposed to pay off these loans if this is going to be the result of my payments? I felt like I was throwing money in the garbage, basically. And it changed my optimism about paying off my student loans. I eventually caught up to it, but for so many years, it just devastated me mentally. It threw me into depression. It was just heartbreaking knowing that, that much money that I worked for didn't go anywhere. It didn't do anything. The second thing that made me consider reparations was in 2020, when people were told what they couldn't do. I remember hearing the narrative to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. These are people I like to call bootstrappers. And I remember for 3 months, people were being told what they couldn't do, and these so-called bootstrappers threw a fit. They weren't able to handle what they were being told they couldn't do for 3 months. Imagine being told what you couldn't do for 400 years. And if they're complaining about 3 months, then they should surely understand why we would complain about that many generations. And the third thing was, I want to say last summer, I got my credit score very high. I went to a Wells Fargo to apply for a loan, and I got denied for a loan that I knew I could make payments on successfully. And I wasn't informed that a credit score of 800 could still be. I didn't know you could still be denied for a credit score I didn't know you could still be denied for a loan with a credit score over 800. It didn't register to me. It was something I had never heard of. But at the same time, I noticed how many people I know don't have 800 credit scores because we're not taught these things at a rate that's efficient enough for us to be self-sufficient. And I figured that needed to change. But how do you get a group of people by the masses to change their mentality towards credit and finance? And I thought about it and I said, I think it's time for reparations. This is the time for me to start writing a plan. Because a 1% interest rate cap, that would incentivize people to actually have to go and understand what their credit looks like. It would incentivize people to have to at least try to be financially literate just to get approved for a loan. I think at some point we're going to have to say, hey, when you look at all these other groups that got reparations, and particularly the Jews are notoriously known for being financially literate in almost all aspects of life. And they got reparations and they made massive moves with that money, with the knowledge they already had. If we get reparations with so many of us not being financially literate, what is that going to do to the plans 15 or 20 years from now? Will that uproot the plans? Are people just going to spend the money and then be asking for more later? We don't know that. And although I do think we should be given a chance to even have that question answered by us people getting checks, I think that the Permanent National Reparations Fund will be able to actually give people checks. But for everyone else who was able, they can get 1% loans. And if they have a job for 3 months, they can go to any bank, any credit union, apply for some sort of loan to get them started in a business, or maybe consolidate all their debt to a 1% loan. That's easy to pay off without that much of a financial burden. Or they can apply for an FHA loan that'll be also capped at 1%, and they can get to their first home. There are so many things that could be done with that. So that's what made me think of writing up the plan. What is really holding us back? The first thing that held us back was the denial of access to resources. And the second thing that held us back was trying to get a hold of these resources while being years and decades and generations behind. So that's what made me think of it. I said it's time.
And those reparations checks could go to a black-owned bank, right?
Absolutely.
Or Freeman's
Yes.
Bank.
And by the way, I think we are long overdue for a black-owned financial services corporation to compete with the likes of Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. We have people who have been CEOs of banks. We have people who have the knowledge how to operate a financial services corporation. And I think it's time that we can make one of those, because we can undercut the competition and really shock the world and get in the space that we've never been in before.
All right. Well, we might be looking at one of the many, because we've had black banks before, so maybe you'll be in the long line of legacy black-owned Freeman's or black-owned banks yourself, man. You'll be another CEO of a bank one day, right? I don't know. We'll see.
My first goal is to become a hedge fund manager.
Okay. Well, hey, it's a step in the right direction, man. So where can people reach you if they have any questions about the plan, or you got any social media people can reach out to you? Because I know the young ladies might be like, what's up? Who's that dude on camera? I don't know. I'm just messing. Yeah, you got socials, man?
My social media is Mr_Macon. It's spelled like making, but without the G, and then _moves. That's my social media. You can reach me at my email address at jonathan.a.bohannon@gmail.com, and the spelling for that is jonathan.a.bohannon@gmail.com.
All right, wonderful. All right, bro. Thanks, man.
Of course.